technical difficulty here this morning, but Kathleen, we're good, correct? Thumbs up. Okay. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining. We're excited to have you join us today. Actually, it's a great turnout. We're expecting close to 90 participants, so obviously it's a very relevant topic, and we're excited to have APS and RSP present. Unfortunately, our board president can't be here today. He's just got some work he's got to get done. So you're going to see hear a lot from me, but I'll start again. One of the things we're going to do today is we want to really thank our sponsors. They actually make things happen, and obviously we appreciate their effort, especially through the pandemic. I know everybody's tired of hearing the pandemic, and that's why it's very important that they've stayed true to us and they continue to sponsor. Our platinum sponsors are APS, who's also a presenter today, KM Facility Services, TEPCon Construction. Our gold sponsors are ATI Restoration, Restoration HQ, and TrueView Windows and Glass. Silver sponsors are Brightview Landscape Services, Sun Construction, Titan Restoration, and Western Paper Distributors. Sorry, distributors. Oh, and please make sure you're mute. Our bronze sponsors are Allied Universal, Biojanitorial, Freedom Financial, Military by Corporate Flooring Solutions, Partitions and Accessories, Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport, S&M Moving Services, Systems, SDB Contracting Services, Square Care, Truly Nolan, and Turn It On Electric. Again, thank you very much for your support. We really rely on it and we appreciate it. Very quickly, we're going to go pretty quick because we're trying something new today with the breakout room. So we'll get to that in a minute. But what I'd like to do is very quickly, I'll introduce our executive board and our committee chairs. And then from there, I'll let the committee chairs give any notices or announcements they want to make. Our executive board, the vice president, obviously Chad Ridenour is the president. Vice presidents are Dale Snyder and John Abbey. Sponsorships, committee chair is Stephanie Jones. Community outreach is Christine Schelsman. Career resources is Bobby Joe Husky. And golf committee is Ted Ritter. So with that being said, I'll start with sponsorship. Stephanie, do you have any announcements?
I do. Thank you, David. So many of you may have noticed that we had a mail out go out last week. Please look for this if you haven't already found it. It was sent to you and it has all of our sponsors and their sponsor contact info on the back. Kathleen will be following up and sending that out via email to everybody, but it's like David said, the sponsors are really the ones that support this chapter financially and help it to keep running the way that it does. So when you have RFPs or you have something that you need to go out to bid for, please keep them in mind and try and use them first. Also, we have finalized our IFMA 2021-2022 sponsorship program. It's up there on the screen. This also will be coming out to you via email soon. So if you're interested in signing up or if you'd like to renew, please reach out to myself or to Kathleen, or you can reach out to the sponsorship email shown there. Thanks so much.
All right, community outreach. Christy.
Good morning. You should have seen either emails or social media announcements about our Share the Love blood drive event that is going throughout the month of February. If you participate in this blood drive by signing up, registering through the link, and completing your donation, you can be eligible for raffle prizes. We do have a handful of raffle prizes available, ranging from $25 to $50 in value for gift cards and other physical prizes. So a lot of that will be sent out to you via email as well. So it's all virtual or kind of at your convenience. So we just really would like to encourage you to sign up and to donate and get entered for a chance at one of these raffle prizes. And we'll draw for those on March, I think 1st or 2nd, whichever is Monday. I can't remember.
I believe it's the 2nd. Nope, 1st. Sorry.
Okay, so yeah, March 1st will be the drawing for the raffle prizes. So.
Awesome, thank you. Ted,
Thanks, Dave. Golf, October 15th at the Biltmore again. Early bird registration will be open on March 15th. And the theme is going to be Superhero Golf, the sequel. Everybody had so much fun last year. We're going to do the same thing, but step it up a notch. So hope to see you at the Biltmore in October.
Awesome. Any other comments or announcements from any of the other members, committee chairs? Okay, well, like I mentioned, number one, I just quickly looked, and thank you, everybody. It looks like almost everybody has put their either first and last name or at least the name. That'll be important as we go into the breakout room. What I wanted to do is kind of give you the format, what we're going to do, and then I'll introduce the presenters. Each presenter will be in one of the breakout rooms with a couple of us board members. The intent of the breakout room will be about 10 minutes, and what we're really looking to do is we're going to ask the question is, how has the pandemic and working from home affected you personally, and how has it affected your job or your company? I think we all have different opinions on that, and again, it's really an intent to kind of stimulate what the presentation is going to be about and help you ask and be top of mind with questions you may have. During the presentation, please use the chat box. What I'll do is several of us will monitor the chat box. We'll cut and paste to make sure that your questions will be answered, and then the presenters will probably periodically pull and respond to chats to questions while the presentation is going on. So want to really make it dynamic and informative. So again, with that, I'll let you know the presenters. First, we have Dale Benz. He is a CFM, FMP, and lead AP. He is currently the manager of real estate and facilities at Arizona Public Services. Arizona APS is the largest electrical utility, Arizona's largest, sorry. Dell oversees statewide delivery of planning, design, construction, operations, maintenance, services across 2 million plus square feet, comprised of 118 occupied facilities and more than 450 occupied sites. Dell has been an IFMA member since 2007 and active in IFMA Utility Council since 2009. He has held council positions of website chair and vice president, and currently serving as the president, sorry. Dale also, again, mentioned he is a CFM, so he's very knowledgeable in the profession, and we look forward to his input. Ann Garbayo. Ann is the lead for the Workplace of the Future initiative for APS. Again, she's going to be a very big part of the presentation. She is responsible for implementing a flexible workplace strategy that transforms how the company manages and uses space. Prior to joining the real estate and facilities team, Ann was in the customer service organization and worked on several key initiatives, including management of customer communications during the rollout of automated meters. I don't know if you remember when you were at home when those were coming out, established customer experience team, and developing a data privacy model for customer service organization. Again, Ann's very knowledgeable in the change management and especially how it impacts APS and the facilities. Next is with RSP is Alyssa Franconi. She's an associate principal at RSP. Over the past 20 years, Alyssa has designed, planned, and developed workspaces for a variety of clients, including Fortune 100 companies, American Express, and Wells Fargo. Alyssa is a valued member is valued for creativity, problem solving, positive attitude, and encouraging collaboration on all interior projects. Her demeanor instills confidence from clients, knowing that their needs will be met by the final design solution. I have had the privilege of working with both Alyssa and Dawn, and that is true. Dawn Brown, again, lead AP. She's a senior associate at RSP. Dawn has extensive experience in project management and team leadership, which includes commercial projects involving new design, renovation, interior design, and workplace strategy. Dawn has an in-depth understanding of the project process from programming to construction. Her approach is inclusive, ensuring that the client's needs are the primary focus and that team works well together. Again, please welcome our 4 members and the presenters. Again, I think it'll be very informative, and I look forward to that. With that, unless there's any questions from the presenters or any comments, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and do the breakout. Again, about 10 minutes, and one of each presenter and a couple of us facility managers IFMA members will be on staff. Any questions? Sorry, I was trying to get that through quickly. So I guess, Kathleen, go ahead and send us away. Again, please use the chat box. I'll be monitoring along with others. I'll try to cut and paste questions in. I may even interrupt and ask the question when it's the appropriate time. But with that being said, do we have all the presenters back? I'm trying to look. It appears everybody's back, correct?
Yes, everyone's back.
All right. Well, again, thank you, everybody. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and turn this over to our presenters, and we'll go from there. And I believe the first person you will hear from is Dale Ben. Take it away, Dale.
All right. So thanks, Dave, and thank you, everyone who was in breakout room 3. So we at least had some good initial conversations to get the juices flowing, and really excited to see the turnout here today. And obviously, there's a lot of people interested in this topic and talking about it. So hopefully we can share some things today that help you. Certainly, we don't have the silver bullet. You know, we're working through what works for APS. And, you know, if you have further questions or comments, you know, feel free to reach out to me after the presentation. And also good to see a lot of familiar faces and names as I scroll through the attendee list. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. And really what we plan to do today is share the journey that we've been on as APS, kind of reimagining, redefining what the workplace means for us with everything going on over the past year. You know, along with many of you, you know, we've been sharing and discussing a lot about how do we make best use and best leverage our workplace footprint at APS. And certainly the pandemic has opened up some new doors for us and enabled other shifts in our organization that frankly would have taken a heck of a lot longer to work through otherwise. But before we get too far ahead about where we're going, let's take a step back, and I just want to set some background context of where we started this journey. So if you rewind about 2.5 years, so we actually started this all before COVID started, and had launched an initiative in facilities to address our growing space constraints across the company. And really what started it all was, you know, we just had very limited flexibility in our space. Our occupancy was way up, which was causing increased costs to move and churn people around. And it was basically our customers are saying, hey, you're taking too long and you cost too much, you know? So that wasn't working for them, and that wasn't working for us. And it was frustrating. But we hadn't done a good job, I think, framing the challenge that we were up against as a facilities organization and educating, you know, our customer business areas, our leadership. So we took a step back and created a one-page infographic. We knew we needed to tell this story on one page. And then we needed to socialize that challenge if we were going to get some funding and resources to really move the needle forward. So like I said, we created this infographic. We socialized it with our leadership and stakeholders to really paint the picture of you know, the challenges we were up against that at the time only we were feeling. So really the story we told was, you know, we have basically 2 headquarters worth of space across the state. We recently got out of 250,000 square feet of lease space, which is a huge win for the company, you know, substantial cost savings, obviously, but it really left us in a place where we were 90, 95, even 100% assigned at some of our key campuses. So our utilization was way up, and our occupancy was continuing to grow at about a 3% tick annually as we stood up new technology projects, brought on additional contract workforce. So we were really reaching a real estate cliff where we had to answer the question, do we build, do we buy, do we lease, or do we just reimagine how we're using space and think a little bit differently about it? I think intuitively for us in facilities, we knew we had an opportunity, but we really needed to convince the rest of the business that made sense. So we laid out several different scenarios and said, hey, if we do nothing, we're going to spend this much money and need this much space. If we're, you know, moderately aggressive, then you know, we can improve, or we can be super bold and, you know, turn into Google and, you know, be super flexible at the time. And we knew all those had different cultural impacts along the way. And we basically knew we needed to spend some time developing a strategy that made sense for APS, that, you know, was supportive of our customer affordability efforts. Clearly, you know, the cost to deliver our goods matters, and we need to keep it affordable. But we also wanted to strike the right balance with the impact it was having on, you know, the culture of our people and the organization. So we knew this wasn't going to be a cookie cutter recipe that we could download off the internet. We needed a solution that made sense for APS. And we also knew we didn't have the resources and skills in-house to do this work. at least quickly. So we put out an RFP, very broad scope of work with some very specific outcomes, and really let the market and the experts tell us how we best do this. So we went through an interview process, and as you've probably put 2 and 2 together, we selected RSP architects to assist us in our strategy journey. So I'm going to actually turn it over to RSP, and they're going to tell you a little bit more about how we spent the better part of 2019 putting the strategy together.
Thanks, Dale. One quick thing, just before we continue on, if you are not speaking, if you just put your microphone on mute, we're getting a lot of background noise. So thank you so much. If you have a question, please feel free to unmute and ask any sort of questions or type them in the chat, but appreciate that. So as Dale kind of mentioned, we started going through this journey that really started kind of with this partnership between APS and us with RSP. When we started kind of kicking off, what APS did is they created a steering committee. So it really allowed some of their leadership and middle management to become champions of this effort and this strategy. And I think that was a really, really smart decision for APS, because it allowed the rumor mill to kind of stop, and it really allowed for these people to make sure that they were, the appropriate message was going out to their people. And it also allowed us to identify, when we were going through some of these workshops, the people that would be vocal, that would share their opinions and would continue to kind of keep this positive spin onto this new workplace of the future. There was a lot of fear around some of this. APS had a lot of very tenured employees within their organization. And so, you know, hearing this rumor mill of like, oh, these strategists are coming in, they're going to potentially take my workstation away from me, or they're going to take it from a 6x8, and now I'm going to be in this tiny little, you know, benching workstation. And you know, we all feel kind of this sense of, you know, place when we have our own workstation. So there was a lot of fear around it. And so having that steering committee as part of our Change Champion group was really, really important for us, and I think made a huge difference for the future of our change management and the messaging that went out to all of the employees. So we kind of went through this discovery phase where we started doing a series of workshops, surveys, and utilization studies. So what we were finding is that spaces weren't really properly being used. Spaces were too large. A lot of their meeting spaces booked, you know, all day, every day. It was a huge complaint. People couldn't get into a meeting space, but they weren't really right sized. So we really had a lot of really, really large meeting spaces that only 2 to 4 people were using, and just kind of a waste of space and not really giving the proper choice and efficiency of space for what they need to be used for. Going through all of this, you know, this is probably about a year's worth of work. So when we talk about this strategy, it's not something that just happens overnight. This is a process that we really went through to understand APS as a business, to understand what they were lacking, to understand what they were really looking for, and what things from a cultural standpoint could we bring forward and make sure that we didn't lose, because that was also really important for them from a cultural standpoint. So throughout this whole process, when we finally got to the synthesis, we thought we had come up with this really, really robust strategy, which we did. And we started implementing some of the spaces, which is the work cafe that Dale and Ann will talk through in a little bit and show some photos of. And then COVID hit. So really our world kind of, all of us, it kind of turned upside down. And so it really allowed us to take a step back and to say, what now? What does the future of the office look like? We had just spent a year and a half coming up with this strategy for APS, and we really believed that that was the future of the work environment. We really believed that we were taking these giant leaps forward and pushing APS into a different category. We were allowing a more modern work environment. We were giving them more choice. We were right-sizing a lot of meeting spaces, offering collaboration spaces. And that was really, really a huge leap for them. But then once the pandemic hit, we all kind of took a step back and we said, you know, how does that change now? Where do we go from here? And I think that's really when we had a lot of aha moments. And it really, you know, from APS being a client and Dawn and I working really closely with them, we were able to kind of push each other and really look at what does the work environment look like in the future. So this process was great, but what does it look like in the future?
So thanks, Alyssa. So obviously, Alyssa alluded to some of the challenges and the evolution we went through, and we had a robust strategy document that came out the other side. But really, we needed to boil that up to a few kind of guiding principles, North Star, so to speak, that would allow us to prioritize decisions and investments that we were going to be making in our workplace along the way. So we created kind of three main principles that we wanted to make sure we were checking the box as we implemented projects moving forward. One was, and I'll probably use it several times because it's just inherent to who we are, it's customer affordability. We have to be efficient, space costs money, and we have to make best use of it. So that's table stakes for us, and that's kind of a prerequisite to anything we do. With that said, it's got to be effective. It's not about cramming more people in less space. It's not about building, I picture a call center with just people jammed in everywhere. And that's pretty much what a lot of the people we were talking to were picturing as well. So from a change management perspective along the way, we had to help explain the concepts. And I think as they start to see some of the projects we built out, they had a sense of relief. But initially, I think that's what people were thinking. Part of effective is also being flexible. We're changing as a utility faster than ever before, more in the last 10 years than the 100 before that. So we'd be lying to ourselves if we knew what we were going to look like in 5 years, much less 10 years. So we want our investments to be flexible and adaptable to be able to evolve and change over time. And then the last one is one that we paid absolutely no attention to prior to this, almost no attention. Is the energizing principle. And really the workplace is not a tool that we thought of in the past, or at least invested in to attract and retain talent. So we actually, just kind of an interesting data point, we always survey our interns when they come in every year and ask them what they think about our space. And year after year, it's bland, it's boring, it's old fashioned, it's older than I am, is what we hear. So we started to gather some of that kind of anecdotal, feedback and started sharing that as well. But the reality is where people come to work matters. The experience we provide matters. And while it may not be the driving reason behind their decision, it certainly is a factor and has an impact. So as we look at attracting and retaining the top talent, certainly workplace is something that we can use to help motivate and land the resources that we need as an organization. Next slide, Don. So just one quick tee up, and I'm going to hand it off to Ann Garbayo. If we spent a lot of time thinking about how do we get from today to tomorrow, and we identified 3 shifts that we need to make as an organization if we're going to be successful. We could build out all these new spaces and new workplaces, but if the ecosystem we were deploying was going to work, we had to make sure we were modeling the right behaviors. So it was really important to go through some of these organizational changes in parallel with building out our new spaces to make sure that they were going to be effective for people. So with that, I'm going to let Ann talk a little bit about the 3 shifts that we had to work through at APS.
So the 3 shifts really are kind of 3 cultural shifts that we had. And so the first one was employees and leaders kind of thinking about work happens at my workstation, to the shift of, work happens anywhere. And so part of this principle was that we were going to be aligning the space standards to the way that we work. And that meant decreasing the amount of individual space. So employees were thinking, well, I go to work, it's my desk, and I do everything. I sometimes collaborate, sometimes I need heads down focus. I kind of do everything at my desk. And I don't like it because it's noisy, it's not conducive to work and all of that. So what I really need are higher panels, so it's nice and quiet, right? So when we looked at our strategy, we knew that we wanted to design spaces that support different ways that people work. So we created spaces that allow people to go and do some focused heads down work, or spaces that actually facilitate and help support more of a engaging kind of discussion or to collaborate together. And so it really was about using design, making it affordable to kind of help change this culture and this mind shift of of like when I come to work, the only place that I work is at my desk. The biggest enabler of this first shift is really helping managers understand that they need to manage productivity and not presence. So not all of our leaders, but we did have a decent number of leaders that felt like, well, yeah, if you need to stay home, you know, Cox Cable is coming, that's fine. But no, I mean, you're probably not working if you're at home, right? The pandemic really put this on its head. I mean, if anybody would have ever said all of APS will be working from home, the entire company, except for our essential workers have to be on site, I don't think anybody would have believed it. And this actually has moved us probably 10 years into the future. Today, everybody gets it. We had to do it, and we're doing it really well. And employees really want to work from home, and leaders understand now. It's just managing productivity and managing a little bit differently. So then the second shift that we had was a really big one for us, which was owned privacy for a few to access to privacy for all. So in our kind of traditional model, we had office space for managers and above. So they had a private enclosed office. And what we realized is that we were actually awarding privacy based on job title, job status, when the reality is that everybody needs privacy. Your frontline person needs privacy to call a doctor or to call a school. You know, we all have differing needs throughout the day. It could even be a private contract or a private conversation. So we kind of looked at eliminating offices. We're actually piloting no offices. We had a couple of leaders who on the floor that we'll talk about in a minute around, they were very progressive and they're like, you know, I don't think I need an office. So we're trying that. But if we do end up putting in offices in some other areas, they will be what we're called a leveraged office, where if they're not in the office, it can be used as a huddle room or a quick place to be able to meet and have privacy. So this biggest enabler here was having a democratic workplace, understanding that everybody needs access to privacy and there needs to be enough private space that you can, that anybody can go and grab a room and do whatever it is that they need to do. And then the third one, the third shift is tethered by technology to technology empowered. We're an electric utility. We do have a lot of security concerns, and we have traditionally had an IT organization that's kind of difficult. It's ponderous. It takes a long time to make changes. And we knew that if we're going to have people working anywhere, we need to have technology that's flexible, but it also needs to be consistent. So we can't have different platforms, or you go into one conference room and it's one type of, like maybe we have Zoom in one meeting room and then set up for Teams in another. We need to have a single platform so everyone's experience of whatever it is when they're using technology is the same. And it's kind of like Apple, it's easy. It's like you don't need a manual to use it. You can kind of intuitively figure it out. So this was really a partnership with IT. We had them involved with us in our project team to create this strategy. So they were really able to help us really embed the technology experience that we wanted to provide employees to give them flexibility and freedom. And so can we go? Yes. So the first project that we did was a work cafe in the lobby of our corporate headquarters. And it was open a month and we all had to go home for COVID. But this is, I mean, as you can see, it is a spectacularly beautiful space. It was our very first project. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to give employees the ability to experience what a new workplace could be. We knew we weren't going to be able to remodel everybody within the first year. And so we would have folks waiting for a remodel on their floor and to experience space. And so everybody has a space here that they can come in and enjoy. And also it really lowered fear. So the folks that we were doing a pilot on our 8th floor at our corporate headquarters, there was a lot of fear. It was like, oh my gosh, you're making our desks really small. It's going to be super loud. It's going to be like this open workspace. How am I going to get work done? So this was a fantastic way to really get people experiencing what it could be like. And I had like one employee who was particularly concerned and really worried, grabbed me in one of these spaces and he's like, is our space going to be like this? I'm like, yeah, it's going to be similar, really similar. He's like, I could totally work here. And I'm like, really? Because you've told me you really want all these high panels and things. He goes, yeah, but you've got a little bit of music and there's a buzz. And so it's like, I could totally concentrate. I mean, this is really cool. So this was a fantastic way, I believe, for us to kind of get started and get people excited about what this is rather than afraid, and to test out things and to have a great space that we could go in and we can work. It's designed for you to plug in anywhere, bring your laptop to actually converse, socialize, or to grab lunch or a snack and enjoy the space. Let's see, Dave, in the short time in use, did the cafe generate things not to do? So far, no, but we only had like a month. So I don't think there was anything that we have decided not to do. Dale, is there anything you can think of?
No, I wouldn't say not to do, but I think there was probably a different, level of finish and some different things we did in a common area cafe that maybe we wouldn't do at scale across the portfolio. I mean, I could probably rattle off a couple of different constructability and facilities issues, but from a strategy perspective, I don't know that we occupied long enough to really understand that that we missed the mark on anything in particular. So that was it was kind of a bummer to only have had a month of occupancy to really understand and see how people were using it and then leave the workplace. So something we're certainly looking forward to as we reintegrate our workforce back into our buildings is picking that back up and seeing what lessons we can learn.
And just one last thing too on the work cafe, that was one of our largest change management efforts, I think, throughout this entire strategy. That space alone, like Anne mentioned, took so much fear away from people once they were physically able to experience the space. It just took so much away, and it got people so excited about what workplace of the future really meant. And I even remember we had a lot of conversations, and Anne was working really, really closely with a lot of the executive assistants and really encouraging leadership, senior leadership at APS to go and use this space to set the tone that it was okay to have meetings in this space, that it was okay to grab a cup of coffee and have some alone time and send out some emails, that this space was really, really embracing kind of that first shift of you don't have to just go to your workstation every single day and work at your workstation. And we really wanted everybody to experience it. And we really needed that tone to be set by leadership so that the message was sent that it's okay to get away from your desk. It's okay to use these different types of spaces and do different types of tasks throughout your day. So I say kudos to APS for this. I think they were really forward thinking with this approach, and the HR and IT leadership support that we received from both the technology standpoint and having, wireless here and allowing for technology to be supported, and also for HR for creating policies to really allow this space to come to life and to be utilized the way it was. So.
Thanks.
Yeah,
right. Go ahead.
Just to provide kind of when we were first designing this, I remember talking about putting a TV up in the cafe and actually having cable, and I thought, well, people are just going to be sitting down there in the cafe watching ESPN all day. I mean, that was kind of our starting point, and clearly we worked through that and got people comfortable, but it was definitely a good tool to kind of manage through that change at scale where a lot of people had access to it. So again, in the month we had, it was a hit. Certainly we'll have some learnings when we get back, but it was a great kickoff to this initiative for us. And then we started working on our first, what I would call traditional office space floor. And, like the rest of you, everything just kind of came to a standstill with COVID, and we were right in the middle of demolition. So we took an intentional pause on the project and spent about 45 days reevaluating our strategy. To Alyssa's point earlier, it was like we spent all this time and it's like, okay, do we have to redo this? What do we need? How do we move forward? And the cool thing is, you know, we did make some changes and we made some pivots and shifts, but it adapted really easily, really well, I would say, with just some really furniture modifications. But to kind of put it into perspective, there's really two things we learned out of this when we did that evaluation. The obvious one was we needed to make sure that we were keeping our workforce healthy and safe, and needed to make some tweaks to make sure we had the right physical distancing. We supported good hygiene principles, had access to hygiene resources, things like that, which I'm going to let RSP cover in just a minute. But the second one, Dawn, if you can go to the next slide, and probably most surprising and most impactful was, I think, the desire for flexibility in our workforce. To Ann's point earlier was, you know, very traditional, stodgy utility. And I'm probably embellishing a little bit, but it was very traditional as far as how we worked Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And that's common in the whole utility industry. And when people went home and had been home about a month, we sent out a poll asking how long, I guess, how they desired to work once the pandemic was over. And 70% of our workforce who had the ability to work remotely, again, not everybody can, wanted to continue to do so 3 or more days a week. So that was a huge eye-opener for me. I think an eye-opener for the team, that the percentage of our workforce had that desire. And then just kind of an interesting update, we actually reinitiated this poll about 2 weeks ago, and that number's up to 85%, which I was curious to see if it's going to go back, if people are missing the workplace or they're really embracing kind of the remote and flexible work. So at least from APS perspective, it seems to be that a good chunk of the workforce is embracing it. Again, not that we don't go back to the office, because I think there's certainly a purpose there. I think it's just a different purpose than maybe it served before, and it looks a little bit different. So just to kind of put a bow on it, and I think Ann alluded to this before, you know, COVID really, the silver lining out of this is the progress we've made as an organization with respect to how we work and the abilities we've built in our flexible work practices. And really our goal now is to not take a step backwards. We want to continue to be forward thinking, design for the future. And really, I think we've moved forward 5 or plus years in that conversation. So with that, I'll be quiet. I'm going to hand it back off to RSP to talk a little bit more specifically about the workplace adaptations we made in light of COVID.
Thanks so much, Dale. So we really looked at 4 different principles when we thought about our response to COVID. Once we took this pause and we reevaluated, it really came down to density, geometry, choice, and hygiene. And we'll go into each one of these a little bit more specific. So density. So how do we implement a 6-foot physical distance so that people can meet out in the open? And when we first started talking about how we were going to make these adjustments, there were conversations about lock-in conference rooms. And I just cringed. I thought, how are we going to do that? You know, if you want to go into the office to collaborate, but you're going to lock all the conference rooms because you don't want people gathering in an enclosed space, people are going to gather outside the door. You know, if they're going there to collaborate, if that's their reason to go into the office, we need to give them that space. And so we started to create areas out in the open where people could meet. And so we reconfigured the workstations. And so you can see in the slide, pre-COVID, it was our workplace of the future. We were being very bold in this scenario for where APS was originally. And then the post-COVID plan, you can see we started to create some collaboration areas that were out in the open where you could keep that physical distance and still get good airflow out in the space. And then in the enclosed spaces, we did look at reducing the seat count for day one so that you got that physical distance if you were in an enclosed room.
One other thing to add on to this too, Dawn, is you can see in some of those open collaboration spaces, you know, that we do have open seating. And one thing we really strategically did when working with the furniture vendor was selecting furniture pieces that are heavy enough that people aren't going to be dragging them close to each other, putting them right next to each other, so that we can really maintain that 6-foot physical distance. So those chairs, yes, they can be moved, but your average person is not going to walk up and start reconfiguring the furniture and pushing those collaboration spaces together. So we were really strategic when selecting specific items to make sure that although flexibility was really important, we also wanted to make sure that we could maintain a safe environment and still keep that 6-foot physical distance between people for the time being.
I want to give a shout out to Goodman's. They were really a great partner in this process because construction had already started. And so how could we make these changes and really respond with a furniture solution? And so all of the construction, all of the hard walls stayed the same, but yet we moved into the furniture solution. Oh, we're getting some feedback. So next is geometry. So we looked at how we could, when we had designed the furniture originally for the workplace of the future, it was a kit of parts. And so it was meant to be flexible. And so we really got to put that to use. We turned a lot of the stations so that you didn't have that face-to-face orientation, and started to reconfigure to try to break up the runs. And then we did implement screens and barriers, but where they're appropriate, not everywhere, so that everybody feels like they're working in a bubble, and just where it was appropriate.
Dawn, I think that was like really key. We have to remember this was kind of back at the beginning of the pandemic. And when we met with like our safety groups and we're talking, and even when we were initially sort of like, what are we going to do with this floor plan? I mean, our initial thought was, how many, plexiglass clear screens can we get? How high can we make the partitions? And, how are we going to do that? And it was just like, we can't. I mean, my gosh, that'll take us back 20 years, right? And so this was a really good effort about all of us kind of pushing each other and saying, oh, that just doesn't feel good. And well, what about this? And yeah, that would work. And so, so it was definitely, we had to evolve. We had to evolve to a floor plan like this.
Yeah, it was definitely a team effort. I remember that day, our first round that we sent out, and Anne called me and she's like, it's good, Dawn, it's good, but you can do better. And we did, and it pushed us. I think even our team, we had pushed APS. We had looked at Workplace of the Future, at their work typologies, and we were moving to a mobility strategy that was 40% unassigned, unplugged as we called it, and that was a big step. And so now we had leaders. This is the IT floor, and their leader said, you know what, if we're going to do this, let's do it. Let's be bold. And now we're going to pilot 100% unplugged, 100% unassigned. And what that does is it really opens up choice. And so Alyssa and I talk about this a lot because we have different home lives. My kids are adults and have moved out, and it's nice and quiet at my house. I can work here and focus really well. But Alyssa has little kids, and it's much harder for her to work and to focus. So we have different reasons to go into the office. I want to go to the office because I miss my coworkers. I want to collaborate. I want to work together. But Alyssa may need spaces to focus. And so we want to give that variety to everybody. So whatever your activities are for the day, you get to choose. So this plan is just showing a variety of those different spaces. So we have pinwheels, we have lounge seating. We're all getting comfortable working at home, so this may feel great when you go back into the office. We're also creating those big chairs that you can collaborate, but keep that physical distance. And then some workstations, because people are still comfortable working in a workstation. But we started to think about where you work as a work point. So a work point is a place where you can sit comfortably, have a surface, and have access to power. No longer are we looking at the number of workstations, but we're looking at work points, because there are a variety of spaces to work in, and we need to include all of those when we're thinking about the occupancy of the floor. And then hygiene. Hygiene is, we know that this is very important, and so we wanted to make sure that hygiene stations were easily accessible to everybody. We all have heard of the HOA kind of guidelines, or the gym mentality, that when you go into a space, when you go to use a machine in the gym, you wipe it down before you use it. You use it and you wipe it down before you leave it. And so really creating that, that way of thinking, so that when you use the space, we all make sure we're doing our part to keep it clean. And APS is very safety oriented. You know, they're not going to let somebody pull in an extra chair into a conference room and get close. They know that it's up to each individual to speak up about safety. And so they will be the perfect people to test this out, because they're going to follow the rules. But this is just showing that we do have an area in the plan that is, we call the library, and that's where we've provided those tall panels that even if you want a workstation, some people may feel more comfortable with tall panels. So let's provide that as an option as well.
And even to support, you know, somebody could be very distracted, you know, so they don't necessarily want to be out in the open office plan in a more open environment, because they get acoustically or visibly distracted quite easily. So creating some of those spaces that are both quieter from a sound perspective, but also from a visibility perspective. You're kind of off of a main aisle, you're in an enclosed room that just feels a little bit more set back, so that you don't have quite as many of those distractions. So really kind of catering to a lot of different types of work modes, a lot of different types of choice for everybody within the office to utilize this space.
Can I jump in here real quick before you get to the next slide? There's a couple of questions I think would be timely to answer, if I can get. So one is, can you kind of, and this is probably for APS and RSC, but what kind of reservation space process are you going to use for that open?
I'll take this one, Ann. So we obviously identified a need for a space reservation system. We use a pretty generic one through Microsoft Exchange today with no user interface. So we're rolling out a project this year. It'll likely be Microsoft Rooms, but we haven't deployed it yet, and we're literally spinning that up and working through that. Hope to have that out later this year.
Okay. And then I think there was another one on, I think it was just more of a vendor question on your AV technology. Can you share who did your AV?
So we're currently working with iMedia on the AV solutions. This is our current vendor, if that's what they're asking.
And then I see that there's a question about the type of technology that we put in each workstation. So we, for the first time, we've always had network cables everywhere. So this floor is our first new standard of wireless everywhere. We have plugs everywhere so people can charge their devices. Our desks have 2 monitors that are also serve as a docking station for most of our equipment has USB-C ports. And that was key, is that we just make sure that all of our areas, and we have monitors everywhere, because we know we're going to be a blended work group, some at home or working from another area as well as internally.
Okay. Specifically to the workstation technology, one thing that was important as we unplugged people, because we're trying to, again, save money. I'll go back to the customer affordability over time. You know, we do 1,000 to 1,500 moves a year, and every time you're picking up monitors, phones, and all that stuff that goes along with it. So as we build out our new spaces, it's all fixed monitors with a USB-C connection. So basically it's like bring your own device, plug in, and start working, where if you need to move, you're picking up your device and moving somewhere else. So there's, you know, some decent cost savings over time for us managing churn and keeping a consistent technology kind of stack on each desk was an important strategy and was different for us and new. other than just letting people kind of order whatever they wanted. So that was a key piece to it as well.
Excellent. And I think the other questions we can address is the next slides, if they're around ratios. Sorry, Dawn, you were going to say something?
No, just to add on to what Dale was saying, that assigned equipment really also helped with hygiene. So that equipment was assigned, like mice and keyboards and things like that were yours that you keep with you, so that that helps with a hygiene scenario. So yeah, getting to the numbers. So the original floor plate had 109 occupants assigned to that floor. There are 102 workstations and 7 private offices. And that comes out to 109 work points. Pre-COVID, our workplace of the future at 40% unassigned, the floor could accommodate 176 occupants. And here we had 115 workstations and 32 work lounge, that's that work point. And now post-COVID, now that we're going 100% unplugged, unassigned, the floor can accommodate over 200 occupants. We've reduced the number of workstations, but we've increased those work lounge, those collaboration seats out in the open. And so together our work points have actually increased, even though we've reduced the number of workstations. In terms of collaboration, they had some enclosed collaboration, but we've really increased the collaboration in the enclosed rooms. Post-COVID, day one, those seats will just be removed so that the number is slow, but it can easily get back up to the original pre-COVID numbers. And then for open collaboration, we added many more seats and then also a big social break area as well.
There were a couple of questions here around what is your ratio of work points to supported employees? And then have you been able to define an average desk sharing ratio to use when planning these workspaces, and a ratio of individual seats to collaboration seats? So we did do a lot of those, that analysis. I'm not a numbers person. I think I'm going to let Dale and Dawn address this one.
I was like, do I have my strategy book in front of me? I think it was 1.15.
Yeah.
That we used for our ratio, the sharing ratio.
Yes, yes. And one of the things that we are doing is we will be putting sensors in everywhere, because we want to know what works, what doesn't work, and understand, is it the furniture, is it the configuration? And that will also help us determine, especially because we really don't know, like as we start coming back to work, I believe we're going to go to like 180 people to 200 people that we'll assign to this floor to start off with. And then our sensors can help us determine, I think that we'll be targeting like around probably 80% occupancy. And so if we find that we're at, 20, not 20, but like we're at 50% occupancy, then maybe we'll assign 300, or we can tweak it down as well. If it's packed all the time, then maybe we'll lower that. So anyways, I don't know. Dale, did you have anything else to add?
I think it's important to say that this is a pilot floor. So you're really testing it out. And you really want to make those adjustments, see how people, push the limit to really try and test it out, knowing that one thing is not going to work for everyone. And so we can make those adjustments and learn from it for the next floor, and keep that data so it can improve as we move forward.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, and my audio was cutting in and out, so sorry if this is repeat, but understanding how to measure space utilization in a flexible workplace is a big piece to that puzzle, and understand what kind of utilization that we're getting on the floor and being able to adapt to that. Can we assign more people to the floor? Should we assign less people to the floor? So that's going to be, some of the next challenge that we work through as people start to come back into the workplace. And then it looks like there was a question on setting metrics or KPIs to be able to analyze productivity or output with rates, with 50 to 70% of the people working from home. So APS is intentionally not setting metrics or KPIs around that, because it's really part of this rollout of our workplace of the future, we're going through a whole cultural transformation and really trying to empower our employees, to speak up, challenge, and empower, and then also challenge leaders to manage, to Ann's point earlier, productivity, not presence. So at the leader level, if your employees are performing and delivering the results that they should be, they're not micromanaging. Are they on 5 hours a day, 7 hours a day, 15 hours a day? But it's more about, are they delivering results with respect to their job duties? So initially there was some high level looks, like how many people are actually logging in and some of that, but that quickly faded away once the organization got comfortable that the work was getting done. And the reality is the 5% of people who aren't working at home weren't working in the office either. So it's not necessarily a product of them being at home. They're just not working, and that's a whole nother issue for a whole nother meeting. But we didn't want that to drive our strategy and get too caught up in how productive are people when they're at home, at least today.
What other questions? And are there any other ones that are out there? I'm kind of looking through. If you have questions, please feel free to.
I have one. And I know, obviously, you haven't occupied the 8th floor yet, but I was wondering if you guys could share some lessons learned, going through the design process and also the construction implementation.
So I'll go ahead and maybe hit a couple of them. One that was really important was to make sure we were designing for the future and not the present. I think initially, to discussion earlier, is everybody needs a full height office and be in a bubble, and we didn't want to totally unwind all the progress we've made. Not that we shouldn't be thoughtful of it and considerate of how we operate in that type of world, but we certainly didn't want to design our future design to be kind of boxed in by what we're dealing with today. Another one is the partnership between facilities, HR, and IT is absolutely instrumental to being successful. Like I said earlier, we could build whatever space that we want to build, but if the technology doesn't work and you don't have the policy that supports and the behaviors that support that, it's going to fail. So it's cliche, but a three-legged stool that really needs to all work together in partnership. Another one, I think early on we were tasked with being bold by our president and COO, and we're a company full of engineers, so we just love to just sit and perfect things, and it takes a really long time to do that. So I think not letting perfection get in the way of progress and learning from it and moving quick was something that was new for us as a utility. We don't typically move very fast, so that was another, I think, lesson learned that came out of it for me.
Yeah, and I think another really big lesson learned for us was also we thought a lot about change management for employees, like who were going into the space, but we really didn't, and I didn't really pay a whole ton of attention to our internal facilities group. So we are changing standards that our folks, they created these standards based on what they know and that it works. And we're doing things that are really different. And so, yes, we had shared with them Workplace of the Future and the strategy, but again, change management is like, it's a constant communication and really sharing people and helping them understand how, yes, we are spending money on Workplace of the Future, but it is our contribution to Workplace of the to our customer affordability initiative that we have internally, which is really about providing spaces that are effective and efficient. And so what we are doing is cost effective. And so it's just, I think that is something that that we underestimated, and that's just, it's as important as employees managing them.
Yeah, I see it. We have another question about that. This is a headquarters and obviously a corporate office environment. Not all APS's properties work the same way. What study has been done on how this evolves to other work environments? And so we did do a review of service centers and looked at what parts of Workplace of the Future are really important and can apply to a service center. And it was important to make sure that we still followed the guiding principles, and that power was provided everywhere, that people were able to meet and have a variety of choices of where to work. And so even though there are different types of spaces, we were able still to apply the guiding principles of the workplace strategy. And it was flexible to begin with, and this really showed that it was resilient. And as COVID hit, we were able to make changes with the flexibility and the kit of parts that we had put together in the original strategy, so that it was flexible if we had a pandemic and suddenly we had to make a change, or a different type of workspace, like how this would be implemented in a service center. And so it was really important that the strategy was flexible and resilient. And I think it's proving out to be.
Excellent.
Just to add on to that a little bit, real quick. So it's certainly not a one size fits all, and the cafe space you saw in the presentation clearly is not what we would build out in a service center world, right? But I do think it's important from a philosophy perspective. You know, there were things that we are doing as far as, you know, taking leaders out of offices onto the floor with their people, creating a democratic workplace, enabling flexibility for our workforce, thinking about our essential workers and how are we teeing up flexibility for them. You know, there's different things we can be doing. So while it might look and feel a little bit different, I think the design philosophy, when you kind of bubble it back up to, you know, efficient, effective, and energizing, might look a little different, but it you know, it's still relevant in our service center spaces.
Brian had a good question, I think, and it was basically around, you know, not everybody has the possibility of doing the APS Cafe. What would you guys recommend to help individuals transition to the workplace of the future if you don't have quasi swing or beta site?
So I guess I'll start. I think the biggest thing that, you know, most people is when the stakeholders that we're dealing with can't really read a floor plan or really envision what that's going to look like. So there's the fear of the unknown. So I think getting them out to even tours of other locations that you can see what they've done, while it might not be exactly what you're doing, I think letting people visualize it goes a long way in kind of disarming the fear of not knowing what this is going to look like. So that'd probably be my recommendation, is to let people see it or something similar.
And I also think too, it is, so it's kind of interesting because when pre-COVID, we would have had to do this really in-depth change management plan where we were like doing a ton of working with folks to help them work differently. We are still doing change management, but it's a little bit different because people now, as we're talking to employees, they're like, oh yeah, if I can work from home 3 days a week, 4 days a week, I don't need a desk. I'm totally great. So I do think though that when you're making that transition, it's really important to talk to employees, to have workshops, to have leadership kind of there to sort of say, yeah, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it. And when you move them to a space, getting feedback from them. Our plan is we're putting a change moratorium. So just kind of like the first couple of weeks working from home, COVID was like kind of hard because you're trying to figure out how to make it work. You got to let people sort of experience changes as you've intended, and then take the feedback after 3 months, 6 months, and then start saying, okay, so let's talk about what works and what doesn't work. But I think that if people feel like they have a voice and they understand why you're doing what you're doing, and even if they're a little resistant, they may come back. I mean, I believe that people will go through a change and then be like, I kind of miss seeing all of my colleagues every single day. But I really like working from home, and I would just like a little bit more of personal, like real-time FaceTime, right? And so I think people come to their own decisions. I don't know, do you have any other comments or thoughts, Dawn or Alyssa, Dale?
Yeah, I mean, this is where we kind of say that, you know, one size doesn't fit all. Like I would challenge companies to ask, why? You know, why do you want to come back to the office? Because I think every company has a different goal. And if your reason is to have everybody come back in because you feel that productivity is lacking, then your space is going to reflect that. But if your goal, you know, similar to APS, you know, their goal was to keep a culture aligned, you know, was to give people that autonomy and empower their employees to bring them back into the office for that collaboration, for that face-to-face, because that's what they're feeling like they're missing out. But everybody's going to be a little bit different. And so I think that's really what's going to define what your space could potentially look like in the future, is really for us to understand, what is your goal? Why do you want your people to go back? And then we can start looking at, how do we make that happen? I mean, APS is a great example of us just using furniture. We were so far into the construction process that we didn't change any hard walls. And so, you know, furniture systems are set up to be really flexible, and we can really maximize that flexibility by just making changes to your furniture system and reconfiguring things and creating different spaces by using what you already have. And I think a lot of people don't really understand what type of flexibility is really built into a lot of that furniture, and what we can really do without doing major construction projects or big major changes. It's probably not what Dave Ramirez wants me to say right now, because it means less of a project for him, but
we do small ones too. So it doesn't have to be big.
But I think, you know, everybody's gonna, you know, space is gonna look a little bit different. And I think having that flexibility, but also understanding why, and HR policies are really going to drive a lot of that too, on how people return to the office and what that really looks like in that transition period. So it's really important to kind of have that partnership with your technology to make sure that we're providing technology and spaces that really support that transition back. I don't know, Dawn, if you want to add to that at all. But
I think I can just, you know, you were teasing, but one thing that I would suggest too is, if you have a relationship with a general contractor, they can really help you and how to minimize the cost. I mean, you know, we specialize in occupied space, but all GCs can work with you to say, okay, this equipment's salvageable, we can do this, and allow you to be flexible and as cost effective as possible. You know, so I think that should be part of your team as well.
And just one other quick point too, as we've talked about HR, we shared that we had a really close partnership with HR and IT and facilities. It was kind of the three of us. With HR, we talked a lot about it's important from a policy perspective, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that, and this is a really big change for APS. We have never really understood or really bought off on kind of how design impacts behavior. And so we are undergoing a cultural transformation at APS. We have a new officer, a new CEO on, and a new president. They're about a year old. And so they are really wanting to encourage employees. They're really wanting to encourage some empowerment, to have flexibility. And so we have really talked a lot about how our spaces and our design support the culture that we are driving towards. And I think it's important to really look at HR from a partnership perspective, and how is the design or the furniture configurations, or, you know, kind of what we're doing. I mean, we are fortunate in that we are able to do a renovation, but a lot of folks are like, hey, I got what I got. So I have to figure out how I'm going to kind of use what we have in the most cost-effective way. And I think that you absolutely can, but I think partnering with your HR department to really understand what kind of culture are you driving towards, I think you can also really get a lot of support for what you're trying to do.
Excellent. Okay, well, I think we're up against it. I just wanted to have a few minutes here to really thank the presenters for, you know, doing this. It's actually obviously very relevant. I know all companies will be going through some sort of this over the next 12 months. But especially thank you for all the questions and all the attendees. I think there were some excellent thought-provoking questions here. And maybe what we can do is schedule a follow-up in, you know, maybe last quarter and see how things are going as with that. So again, any last comments to the presenters? Otherwise, we will let you guys go. Any questions or comments, guys?
Thank you. We really appreciate your time. This was really a lot of fun. Feel free to contact us, send us emails, ask us any questions you have. We're happy to share what we.
Thank you very much.
Great presentation. Very nice.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Be safe. Talk to you next month.
Bye.
Bye now.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming.